Welcome to a new episode of the Life Science Gets Together podcast. I'm very happy to have today Vassilis Ragoussis, I hope I spelled the name right, on the show. Welcome, Vassilis.
Thank you very much for having me. Excited to talk to you today.
Thanks. Vassilis, one question at the beginning. Your name reminds me of Greece. Summer, sun, holiday, and there is this German song, it's Greek wine, Griechischer Wein. Are you from Greece?
Yes, I absolutely am. And yeah, your description there kind of makes me quite nostalgic. I certainly miss it. And yeah, my whole family's from Greece. So every summer I get to go and enjoy the Mediterranean. And as you said, the lovely food and sort of the sea is just absolutely beautiful. And yeah, so this year, as I'm sure the same for many people, I wasn't able to go on kind of the holiday that I wanted. So gonna have to wait till next year.
Yeah, it's a little bit unfortunate. But let's come back to the topic, I would say. Let's start with the topic. You live in Oxford and are a student at the Oxford University. The topic of today is student life and entrepreneurship. And when I think back to my days when I was a student, it's 25 years ago. So the basic narrative that people grew up with was finish school, find a job, and if you must, then study, but it's not necessary. And if you basically finish your university career, then find a job. How is the attitude at the university amongst students these days?
Yeah, it's good to hear your sort of background. And I think maybe perhaps I was a little bit peculiar because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I was very lucky that I got a scholarship to go to America, and I went to Boston University, and there it was a very sort of broad curriculum, and I was studying, anything possible that I could do. It's very sort of free sort of class schedule. And I was exposed to a number of different sort of industries and, domains. And towards the end of it, I started getting quite interested in genomics and genetics and public health. And, I didn't really know what I wanted to go into, but I knew that I was fairly good at genetics and genomics. And so it's kind of like the serendipitous sort of, occasion that, I applied to Oxford and was very lucky to get in and, kind of signed up for another 4 years at least of studying and, kind of postponing real life, I guess. And yeah, I think it's been a fantastic experience, and it's kind of allowed me to sort of, really, really understand what it is I want to do and how I want to sort of live my life and how I want to be. And it's really helped sort of mature me. And I've been very lucky to sort of be part of this great institution. And if you'd like, I can kind of go into a little bit what it's like in terms of a life science perspective in the UK. Sure. And in Oxford.
Sure, it would be great.
So yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about the last 6 to 8 months is, innovation really sort of thrives during tumultuous times. And it's felt like being at Oxford, in particular with the focus on the Oxford vaccine group, the Chalox-1 vaccine and sort of the recovery trial, Oxford Life Sciences is in a really good place. And so I guess before I focus on Oxford, I can kind of give a bit of a context on the broader UK landscape. And we've done a very good job.
Absolutely awesome.
Yeah. So we've done a very good job of the life science strategy. In the UK, we spent around 37 billion on R&D in life sciences in 2018, which was around 1.7% of GDP. And they want to increase that to 52 billion, which will be 1.4% of GDP by 2027. And in particular, sort of our prized sort of possession, I guess, is the NHS, which I'm sure you've heard lots about. And this basically gives us direct access to patients, and we see around 1.4 million people every 24 hours, and they're all from diverse backgrounds. So I think the real challenge that I've seen is trying to incorporate the NHS into a broader sort of life science strategy. And we've got initiatives such as the Accelerated Access Collaborative and the Commercial Medicines Unit and other long-term pricing agreements. And I think these sort of initiatives are going to really help increase the NHS uptake of best value treatments and technologies. And, right now, I think the NHS is actually underutilized. Things are getting better. And I think an example of that is the NHS is the first health system in Europe to actually agree access to CAR T therapies and treatments. So this kind of showed, it was the fastest sort of product approval in the NHS's 70-year history. And so we're going in the right path with that. And, outside of that, we've got to focus on developing a dedicated life science scale-up investment program, new national infrastructure, an emphasis on nationwide projects. And in particular, for me, I think the interesting thing was the 100,000 genome project, which basically sequenced 100,000 patients with a particular focus on cancer and rare diseases. And the aim there is to try and shorten the diagnostic odyssey, so the time that you believe you have this sort of rare disease to actually providing a diagnosis for the patient. And we're trying to sort of accelerate genotype-phenotype associations and actually just provide diagnoses for patients that are lacking one. And what's really interesting is it's recently been announced is that there's this flagship sort of accelerating detection of disease program, which is 5 million patients, and they're recently going for sequencing, and that will sort of provide a longitudinal biological sampling and other sort of research purposes. So it's really fantastic. And when I think about Oxford within that system, I think Oxford has certainly got a huge amount of potential, and it's starting to be realized. And when I think about what are the 4 sort of factors that I believe make an innovative ecosystem, I think firstly is the ideas. So you have Oxford being the sort of world leader in bioscience research, and we have the top medical science division in the world for the last 14 years in a row, I think maybe even more.
Impressive.
Yeah, and it's so we have that credible, distinguished sort of world-class science, and that's been shown. Companies that we produced have been Adaptimmune, Immunocore, Oxford Nanopore, and obviously Vaccitech with the vaccine. And secondly is the people. The Oxford sort of old academic system, I would say, generally speaking, you have a lot of these sort of distinguished academics, grey-haired sort of biotech experts that have a huge amount of domain expertise and are very certainly world-leading experts in their niche areas of research. But actually, the Oxford name and the brand name in general sort of really attracts, I've seen really top quality postdocs and other researchers. So we've seen some employment growth there. I think the thing that is slightly being missed is, you need entrepreneurs to come in and help commercialize the science. And I believe it would be good to see sort of more higher profile entrepreneurs and willing younger students and willing enthusiastic individuals to come and sort of take these companies through their inflection points and hopefully towards exits. Thirdly is the...
Why do you think entrepreneurs are needed to assist the scientists? That's an interesting thought that you laid out.
Yeah, I mean, what I've seen is that these most academics, they have so much experience within the science, but it's a different ballgame trying to commercialize it and creating a business model that works and really sort of selling the science in the right way and raising money. And I think two different parts need to come together. Is really the entrepreneur, and if you have that within the scientist, that's really great. But it's mostly quite common that you'll have sort of the chief scientific officer, which we have a lot of, we have lots of them at Oxford, and then you kind of need the sort of budding CEO to be able to navigate the commercialization process, the deal process, because it's very difficult. You have to navigate, IP, lots of other sort of challenges that come across a company. So I think, there's several parts that need to come together.
I agree with that. The interesting thing is I have a business background, so I'm not a scientist. And what I saw in the industry is just the usual ways scientists make a career, an academic career at the university. Some jump into a career in the pharmaceutical industry, and they are trained towards the business side over years or decades. I think it's very rare that in Europe, especially, that people that have no scientific background end up in life science. How do you see the situation in the United Kingdom? Are there many people with a pure business background in the industry?
Yeah, that's an interesting point, and it definitely helps to have these finance background people coming in and helping companies and we see a lot of it at Oxford, where you kind of have these, younger entrepreneurs working with, older scientists. And generally speaking, if the team is right, that can certainly work. And something I was going to talk about was certainly that, one of the roles of some of the societies here is to sort of inspire, students to stay within biotech and inspire, people to grow within biotech. And so it's very much a, there's many ways to go about it. And I've seen, both sort of routes at Oxford.
Speaking of Oxford, my touch point with scientists usually is through business. And I see in scientists, especially the younger ones, I see a career in the academic world, staying at the university and doing experiments, research, and later on also teaching young students. When it comes to entrepreneurship, I very rarely hear from students that they want to leave the university and found a company. How is the situation for students in Oxford? Is the university doing something for those students who wish to become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, so this is actually a very good point, and something that I think Oxford has sort of struggled with in the past is kind of really creating a business entrepreneurial environment. And I think it has really improved over the last few years. One thing I'd say is that, biotech is very much seen as this sort of high risk, low probability, capital intensive industry.
Yeah.
So, the cost to take a drug to market is around 2 billion. And I think where Oxford has perhaps struggled a little bit is actually attracting sort of high risk capital from investors. And, the appetite in the UK in general is actually very much sort of lowered in terms of risk capital versus the US. You kind of get a deflation of these valuations. And, you look at sort of the Babe Ruth sort of theory that, you want to hit these home runs and sort of invest aggressively in early stage startups so that you get those unicorns that sort of return the rest of the portfolio. And there's been some really good firms that have, OSI, for example, have raised about 600 million. They're this evergreen funds, and they're starting to invest fairly aggressively. But generally speaking, I find one of the real challenges we have at Oxford is actually retaining students and attracting talent on a student level. And there's this quintessential move. I'm sure there's some Oxford students on the call right now. They kind of want to gravitate towards finance and consulting. And there's this real sort of attraction of these blue chip, sort of big blue chip names with high paying salaries and, glamorous lifestyles. And, I guess it's how you define glamorous. But I think what Oxford could do a little bit better is sort of actually communicate and sort of reflect basically what science is going on at the university. And I think what we were doing as part of the Oxford Biotech Society was actually really creating attractive events, whether it be a founder event or a scientist event or a biotech startup showcase, or even an investor panel to kind of really attract these finance sort of individuals. But really I think there needs to be more of a platform for students to learn about the mission of these companies and what they do, the big challenges, the bold ideas, because it's really cool to learn about. And having these sorts of really high impact events have a lasting effect on these students and really might change their time. Yeah.
You mentioned the Oxford University Biotech Society. Can you explain to me what this is?
Yeah, absolutely. So we were just a small sort of society at Oxford of postgraduates and undergraduates that came together to try and really inspire the next generation of bio-entrepreneurs. And we would try and raise a little bit of sponsor money from pharma companies, and we'd try and hold events and really just provide a platform for networking and sort of informational talks. And I guess what it really comes down to is really trying to develop the entrepreneurial mindset within students. I think, a lot of these students at Oxford are incredibly smart. I mean, they have all the qualities of an entrepreneur, the critical thinking, creativity, communication, problem solving, but it's really not enough. And you have to have this entrepreneurial mindset. And So I think that's what societies like the Oxford Biotech Society can do. And, there's lots of other societies that are doing a fantastic job as well. But they can really sort of work with the institutions and the universities to try and help give students the opportunity to become more entrepreneurial and kind of have the confidence to take ideas forward. And I think that's where we can kind of really push from a university side. And, success and learning are not mutually exclusive, in the startup world. You can do both. And, even if you fail, you actually succeed. So I think there needs to be more of a focus on how to commercialize academic ideas and how to kind of drive students within sort of biotech and life sciences.
That's true. What's happening on the university level in Oxford in the curriculum that students have? Is there anything in a life science study that touches the entrepreneurial space, or is it pure science?
From what I've seen, it's purely science, and it's basically, you do your undergrad, and I think the closest you can get to biotech is basically doing biology as an undergrad, and then perhaps doing a master's. I know a lot of people that have done that. And then going to do a PhD. And, when you do a PhD, it's very, very specific. I mean, you're doing one area for 4 years at least. And I think Cambridge has started to have a master's in biotech and bioentrepreneurship, which is, I think, is fantastic. But I haven't seen that at Oxford yet. And I think, I think we're getting there. I think in the next few years that there will start to be these sorts of programs. And, we can talk about it later, but, there's initiatives such as the Oxford Foundry that are actually trying to fill the gap in that way.
I mean, it's very interesting, science and entrepreneurship. How should I describe that? I think it's basically two completely different things. So on one hand, you have science with having the necessity to going really deep into one topic. And on the other hand, you have entrepreneurship, which I think is a completely different game. How do you see the similarities and the differences between these two disciplines?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I think the easiest way I can probably describe it is choosing it as a kind of career path, I guess. So if you go into startup, you don't have that sort of secure salary. You don't have the secure sort of, stage forward and promotions and all this. Things can change. You can, a trial could flop, or you might not be able to get investment. So I definitely boils down to sort of the risk that a student wants to take. And you go to finance, you're part of big cohort, big companies, and you're kind of a small cog in a very large machine. But the risk that you're taking as an individual going to those companies is fairly low, because you're a very small part of a company. So I guess what I would like to see is a higher risk appetite for these younger students to go out and take a risk. And I'm certainly trying to reflect that with what I do, and kind of taking opportunities that, you might not even be certain are right, or certain you can even do, but, you just find a way and you learn on the job. And I think Oxford could probably help students out a little bit more with that.
Yeah, I mean, entrepreneurship mostly is navigating in uncharted territory anyways. You mentioned the risk appetite amongst students. When I was a student, I mean, in Austria, Austrians love safety and security. And the risk appetite amongst students was, I would say, on a scale from 1 to 10 was a 1, where 1 is absolutely risk averse.
Yeah.
How is the attitude amongst students these days?
Yeah, I think for me, I've been very lucky to be surrounded by a lot of my friends that have gone off to actually start their own companies. I think, which is I'm very lucky to have that. But I say, generally speaking, there is just such an attraction towards sort of finance and consulting, because it seems like this very sort of stable career towards success. So I'd say, generally speaking, the risk appetite just isn't quite there. And I'm not sure if it's sort of linked to kind of a broader, political environment, how people, want kind of, high paying salary early on, or if they want sort of stability with a job. But I'd say, generally speaking, there has been a lower sort of involvement in really high risk things. I mean, you could go off by yourself and try and start a company for a year and, not have any money, but, you might end up having a unicorn, or, you might end up raising money and, being a millionaire in 10 years, but if you take that risk, if you don't take that risk, you'll never really know. So I'd say that generally speaking, there's sort of this hesitant, people are quite generally hesitant in the UK to do really, really, really risky things. And the people that do really stand out. And, you have a lot of those sorts of people at Oxford. But
I always thought in the United Kingdom is pure entrepreneurship. So I always thought it's just the Austrians that are so risk averse. Thinking back to the 90s, I mean, we really didn't have much role models. The internet was young. So most of the people were influenced by their close environment, which changed tremendously over the last 25 years. Now we have the internet, we see success stories from all over the world. I mean, for example, Facebook, Amazon, Apple. How, in your opinion, does that influence the thinking of young students, in Oxford?
Yeah, so I think, great point again. And I think in particular with the coronavirus, everything's gone online, things are accessible through webinars. And, obviously, to your point earlier, also UK is a very good place for entrepreneurship, but, you look at the biggest companies in the world and where have they come from? Amazon, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, they've all come from America, right?
Austria, yeah. I would love to say Europe, but are you aware of any European success story in the last 10 years? So, I mean, on the level of Apple, Google, Amazon, the Chinese have Alibaba, Tencent, so, but from Europe?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are, but not quite at the level of Amazon and Google, Facebook, and Tesla, and those companies are really, really impacting the world. And I'd probably say the closest in Oxford might be Oxford Nanopore, which is sort of this handheld sequencer. But again, they're still actually quite early stage, and I think they still have some big milestones to hit. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely like a really good point. Why haven't we created, the next Amazon, the next Google here in the UK? And I think it's something that we need to reflect on and really figure out.
And not only the UK, I think entire Europe. I mean, Spotify, this is one, but it's not really deep tech. But other than that, we have local suppliers. When I look at the life science industry, we have few companies that are really successful, but for most of them, I'm not really sure if they are still European because they IPO'd on the Nasdaq. So it's basically they relocated most of the operations and the headquarters to the United States. What, in your opinion, could Europe do to support students to move more towards entrepreneurship early on?
I think universities can play a really good role in really developing that entrepreneurial mindset. And Oxford, if I give it an example, so we have an initiative called the Oxford Foundry, which was actually established through the Said Business School here. And the aim here was to build a new generation of ventures that actually better society and actually not only that, but actually nurture more ethical leaders who put the people and planet first. And, I wouldn't, quite call it social entrepreneurship, but I would definitely say that it's more of a focus on impact rather than profit. And the Foundry has been fantastic in gaining funds. I think that their big funders have been Reid Hoffman from LinkedIn and Mohammed Amersi, who's a fantastic philanthropist. And I would definitely recommend reading some of his articles online. We have other initiatives such as the CDL, which is the Creative Destruction Lab, which is based more on science, tech-based companies. And again, they're trying to actually scale seed stage companies. You have OUI, which is a little bit more of a sort of older institutional sort of office, and they're basically working on commercializing, providing funding and consulting services. And you have these newer sort of partnerships that are trying to inspire students. We have the Hill, which is actually sort of a digital health incubator here in Oxford. You have Biotech, OSI kind of forming a Lab 282 partnership, which was actually to translate basic research in disease-related biology. And I think these sorts of programs can start to really appeal to students. They can see sort of the next stage. And I think, yeah, if the university can offer a platform and, high risk capital and a platform that can provide services, advice, mentorship, I think mentorship is really, really critical in this sort of environment, and something that I've certainly benefited from a lot. And we can talk about that again. But yeah,
well, you mentioned the Oxford Foundry. What's your role at the Oxford Foundry?
So I've been very lucky to be part of the Foundry for a couple of years now, and I kind of saw it through its sort of inception, and was working very closely with some of the managers there. And I wouldn't say I had a very big part to play, but I was very lucky to be part of something called the Student Advisory Board, and the role over there was to actually join with other leaders and students from different parts of the university and actually sort of learn about leadership and, tackling big problems in entrepreneurship, and, how do we inspire the next generation? And, it was quite sort of profound to have these younger students come together. And actually they actually were very, we were very lucky to sort of be part of some talks. We had Biz Stone, co-founder of Twitter, come in, Jorn Lessigen, who was he founded Meltwater. We also had Phil Libben from Evernote come in and talk to us. So it was very intimate events of a few students talking to these successful entrepreneurs. And it was kind of my first taste of what it really took to kind of succeed in there. I wouldn't call myself an entrepreneur by any means. I'm an aspiring entrepreneur. Yeah, I would love to become one. But, I think eventually I hope to do that. But I think doing the stuff beforehand and educating yourself about learning how to commercialize a product is really important. And I think, that's what the university can do.
I mean, you mentioned a few companies while you were talking, and it sounded to me that you already had the chance to speak to the world's most successful entrepreneurs these days. I think the most interesting thing that I realized over the last 10 years is that almost none of the really successful entrepreneurs had making money in their minds in the first place. So it was always about, you said it before, social entrepreneurship, impact ventures. So basically they wanted to change something in the world. How is your perception of the attitude of entrepreneurs?
I think this is one of my favorite sort of points is all the mentors that I've had, and I've had some very, very successful mentors who I'm sure have made many, many millions. They've never ever talked about money. They've never ever showed off in any way. And I think that for me has been really telling, and I think it's a real good characteristic. And that humility and being humble and giving back is amazing. And I'm very lucky to have some fantastic mentors who have always made time for me and been interested in talking. And I think that's one of the amazing things about the world nowadays, is that you can easily reach out to people, and if there's a connection there, and you have to give something to them, you have to create a connection, you have to be engaged, and I think that's what the amazing thing about mentorship is. And I guess, yeah, you're absolutely right. If you find good mentors, they don't focus on the money and the profit, and of course everyone needs to make money and live, but it was more about the impact you can have, more about changing people's lives, and in particular in the life sciences, about impacting human health and curing diseases. And I think that for me was really profound.
That's a very important point that you mentioned, not showing off that the people are successful. When I open the internet these days, maybe it's because I have a business background, I see a lot of webinars and seminars organized by people who focus on one topic: how to make 1 million euros. And it's very funny because none of them really answers the most important question in the first place: what's your vision? What do you want to achieve in life, and how do you want to impact the world? And you come directly from the opposite and say, it's important to first think about the vision and impact and find the right mentors who support you. So I'm very interested in, how did you find your mentors? What's your secret?
I think networking is a bit of a skill, and you have to have the confidence to be able to reach out to people and in the right way as well. And I think some of my mentors might be on this call, but I'll give some examples. So I think within the biotech world, one particular mentor for me recently has been Reza Ilkhani, who is a kind of CFO at Biotech in San Francisco, and he's kind of given me sort of a finance sort of perspective. Chris Dokomidula from Dealformer, who I've spoken to recently, I think it's on the call today. He's really given me sort of a really good idea from the deal side of biotech and how the licensing works. And other individuals, Jackie Hunter, CEO of Benevolent AI, and Dave Norwood, who actually founded OSI. I mean, all these are fantastic individuals, and I've missed some out. But basically, it just gives you a flavor that these really high-profile individuals will make time for students that are enthusiastic and want to learn about their futures. And I think the most important here that I can, give, most important point I can give here is, don't make decisions in the echo chamber of your own head. Listen to more experienced people. And, these individuals have been through it all. They've been through, they've taken the hard route, and, they want to make things a little bit easier for you. And I think that's the amazing thing about being able to connect over Zoom and over webinars like this is, you can talk to people that might be able to help you even just a little bit. And usually you can learn something from everyone, really, from anyone and everyone. And I think, interact with people outside your circle and really create a network of mentors that feel like a sort of support system for you. And so that's it.
That's a good point. How was it never make decisions in the echo chamber of your own head? I have to remember that. It's absolutely true. I mean, many people achieved success already, and I don't know who said it. It was definitely an American entrepreneur, but it went like this: find a vision, set a goal, and then look around in the world who already achieved what you want to have and just mirror that. And I think also Gary Vaynerchuk, it's an American entrepreneur without a university degree, he says, who puts it all online, his advice. And he says something similar: go and try to find a role model that that resembles what you want to achieve and learn from them. It's good to hear that you do it in a similar way. So I'm curious, what's your career idea? What do you want to do next?
It's something I certainly grappled with for a very long time. And, as I mentioned earlier, I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do. And I always thought, worst comes to worst, I'll go into be a research assistant or research postdoc somewhere. And I think through the years, it's changed a lot. And, that's one thing I'm very grateful for Oxford. It's kind of given me the opportunity and the freedom to really think about that. And I've actually realized, I am young and, okay, I'm not too young, but I'm just finishing up my studies, hopefully. But I think it's a good time to take a risk. And I think it's a good time to, be part of a team with a really profound mission that does want to help the world. And so I'll hopefully, I don't want to say too much yet, but I'll hopefully be joining a startup fairly soon. And, maybe in 6 months I can talk more about it. And, I don't want to jinx it in any way, but very lucky to be given this opportunity to join this really enthusiastic team with great science. For me, it was kind of trying to move away from, not 100% move away from the lure of, finance and consulting, but kind of try and really, what makes sense in my life right now. And I think it's sort of taking an incremental step towards sort of entrepreneurship through, applying what I've learned in my PhD and doing being part of a startup.
Are you focusing 100? I mean, we don't have to talk about details about the startup. I'm just interested in how you handle it. Are you planning to focus 100% of your time working in the startup, or is it a mixture of 50% university, 50% as academic career, and 50% startup, or another mix?
That's a very good question, because I'm actually slowly finishing up my PhD, which I think people have asked me basically every couple of weeks, how's it going, and I'm just like, still working. So I think my aim is, hopefully start. I need to talk to some individuals first, but I think the aim would be try and finish up as much of my PhD as I can in the next couple of months, and then do some edits and start a career. I think I've been studying for a little bit too long now, so I think I need to take the next step.
Mhm. I mean, I think the beauty in our industry is that there are a lot of possibilities. So mixing academic career with entrepreneurship is still possible. But part of the team must focus 100% on moving the startup forward. How is you said you finished your PhD study slowly. I think it's the experiment, isn't it? You have to do practical work to get to your PhD.
Yeah. Well, it's ironic because the whole thing is an experiment because, I kind of started it not really knowing, what I had to do and how I was going to finish it. So I think, I mean, on a serious note, I was very lucky because I had basically a mix between sort of these wet lab experiments, which were kind of functionally sort of trying to validate these genetic variants, and then also sort of bioinformatic work, which was using in silico predictors to actually predict the impact of these variants on human disease. And I was able to split it fairly evenly with that. And I think the last few months, because I haven't been able to go to the lab, I've just been sort of writing up and doing that. But it's been a great experience. I think, I wouldn't say I'm an academic by any means. And, that's probably what I've struggled with quite a lot is trying to be an academic when I'm probably not really. So yeah, I think when I move to the next step, it's quite interesting, but I'm hoping to go more towards sort of the business development, potentially doing a little bit of operational work and kind of really creating sort of commercial licensing plan for a startup.
Mm-hmm. How did, one question, I mean, with the SARS-CoV-2 situation, I think it might also have had an impact on your experiments. How do you see the impact of the pandemic on life and entrepreneurship in Oxford?
As I said, I think innovation really does thrive during tumultuous times, and I think there's going to be more funding going into public health and life sciences. There's greater importance placed on preventative medicine and therapies that really help try and prevent human disease, and actually potentially could cure and treat human disease. So I've seen at Oxford, it's become more of an understanding of going into science and understanding that it is a super important part. So I think it's a very exciting place to be. And I think that combined with the funding and more of a focus on entrepreneurship, I think there will be a really flourishing ecosystem. There's so much potential at Oxford. So yeah, I think it's a great time to be involved in the space.
We have a question from the audience and would like to hand the microphone to Fraser.
Hello.
Hello, Fraser. Nice to hear you.
Hi, hi Vassi. Good to hear you talking business.
How you doing, man?
Not too bad. So what I'd like to ask is, you made the point around a lot of undergrads finish the studies, go straight into a blue chip role or consulting or finance or something like that. Have you seen examples of people who've done that and come back into the kind of research you're doing? And how easy or difficult that can be, because I think a lot of people fall in that trap of thinking it's the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to just get a job as quickly as possible, but that might actually be stifling some potential creativity, and maybe what your tips are for getting back in the swing of it.
Yeah, great to hear your question, Fraser, and thanks for coming. And it's a very good point. I think consulting and finance, there's a lot of merit in actually going there and gaining those skills, whether it be, I think people joke about, you just go to consultancy to learn about PowerPoints and Excel, but I think you do learn a lot about sort of business development and tackling big problems. So I'd say actually going into consulting for a couple of years is actually a very good route if you can apply it to life science, and of course you can. So I think doing 2-3 years in consulting and going off into a pharmaceutical company or startup is actually a very, very good route. It's whether or not you can actually get lured, if you can get lured away, or if you get kind of happy with where you are. But it would be great to see more people going into consulting and then coming back into biotech. I think it actually already happens quite a bit. But are you thinking about doing that?
Yeah, it's definitely been a consideration. I mean, for context, Vassi and I do know each other from uni, but I was an undergrad when he was a master's student. I think the idea of moving back into that sort of circle definitely crosses mind, because you think you've talked a lot about, social impact of the work that you do. And it's clear that through entrepreneurship, you have a lot more control over that. And maybe as an undergrad, you feel a little bit overwhelmed by the idea of entrepreneurship. I think a lot of people do. I certainly did. Whereas having had a bit of experience working out in the world, you maybe think, maybe I could have a crack at this, and it's whether the support's available there to do that.
No, exactly. I think you've hit the nail on the head there. And it's good to gain a bit more perspective, and you get older, you gain more perspective about how to do things, and taking that leap and taking that risk. So I think if consulting kind of shows people that it's great to learn the business side of things, but you really want to have an impact, and you want to go back into sort of a more social impact based thing. And a lot of startups do a lot of social impact. A lot of consultancies, do a lot of social impact, but it's good to really learn exactly what you want to do, and then go into it at the time when you do.
Brilliant. Thanks, guys.
Thanks a lot, man.
Thank you. I agree to what you're saying. My career path basically was finishing university, working in merger acquisition at large corporations. And I think the advantage is to choose that way, that basically you don't have to figure out everything yourself. You can download it and get paid for it on top of that. It's like finding mentors. And this is a point that's very, very crucial that you mentioned, Vassilis. Finding mentors is an important part in the game. And it's good to see what you are doing in Oxford. What are the let's say the biggest problems that entrepreneurship in Oxford is facing right now that would be helpful to overcome?
Yeah, I think it's a lot towards that risk, and I think I've experienced it myself doing a startup a couple of years ago. It takes a lot to be able to get that initial funding or that initial sort of validation. So I'd like to see a little bit more work being done at the earlier stage, and actually helping either validate or sort of tell entrepreneurs to stop at the right time, or it's not going to ever become anything. And I think, yeah, exactly as Fraser said, what's that first step? It can be very daunting as a young person. And I think my feeling is at MIT and Harvard, it's almost sort of expected that you'll try and go into a startup or create your own thing. And here I'm not quite sure if we're starting to give the students the tools to be able to do that, but I think we're a little bit behind the US in that. So I think that's the biggest challenge is giving the students the right tools, whether it be funding, mentorship services, to be able to take that first step and really know if they want to take the next one after that, or if they want to go back and kind of reevaluate their career choices.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned Harvard and MIT. I think I saw in your Vita that you spent some time there. How was it?
Yeah, so I was actually at Boston University, which was, I loved it. I really loved the American way of life. There's a huge hustle there. There's a great focus on growing. And I think, I was there during a time where I myself was growing, and I was very lucky to be part of a pretty big sports team. So I had a lot of friends, and, I love the food and I love the sports sort of atmosphere. People go to these like huge football games, and it's absolutely wild. And it's I don't know if you've ever been to one, but it's great. I think in particular in Boston, what I loved was it's sort of this med tech hub, and you go towards Cambridge in Boston, and you can sit in Tata coffee shop on 3rd Street, I think it is, and you can have coffee, and next to you will be like a venture capitalist, and the table across from you will be a biotech founder. I think it's such an enriched ecosystem where you really have all the players. And I think, Oxford and Cambridge are really moving towards that. But, Boston has done a fantastic job of combining these high academic institutions with the industry players and with the VC players. And it's really created a really exciting ecosystem.
You think it's much more advanced in the ecosystem in the UK?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many friends I'll make saying this, but I definitely would say yes. And I think, I don't want to get in trouble, but I think there's some great stuff going on here. I mean, OSI definitely have the right sort of vision in terms of raising a lot of money and giving it out. And, I don't think we quite have, aside from that, I don't think we quite have the investor sort of competition on this side. You go, for example, the Y Combinator, all the investors are fighting over each other to be able to invest in these companies. And I think, here, I think it's very much a different situation where, you have to really sort of fight to succeed. Whereas there, they give a lot of, it's much more free to be able to get money and kind of and either succeed or don't succeed. So I think, I would say that the Silicon Valley and Boston and are definitely way ahead of what we have here.
No, I believe the same. I mean, the stories that I experienced here in Europe starting companies was basically it's a good ecosystem for raising money on a scientific level. So with Horizon program, for example, in Europe, it's very unique and very helpful. Once the idea is spun off a university, it's coming a little bit tricky. In some countries, you have public funding available. Very few business angels who have the expertise to survive in the life science industry, which I think is a huge difference to the United States. And the minute we start, let's just stay at the therapeutic level, the minute we start developing companies towards preclinical and clinical development, we have a few funds who are positioned in that spot. It's very helpful. But for bigger rounds, there's almost no money on the market here in Europe. So many companies that I know that become successful, that mature, basically relocate at one point in time, either to East Coast or West Coast in the United States. And what you say about the Boston ecosystem, I think it's just one of the best life science ecosystems in the world.
No, absolutely. And one thing I did want to say is that there's a strange dichotomy, because I think, as much as it's a fantastic ecosystem in America, I think it's getting very expensive. I mean, rent for a startup in Silicon Valley, I don't have any statistics, but I can't imagine it's very cheap. Salaries as well, very expensive. I mean, an engineer in the US is probably 2 to 3 times more expensive than it is over here. So I think, whether or not that's going to be enough to sort of shift startups to the UK, it might well be. And, if you combine that with the fantastic science that we do have here, it would be great to see more of a shift towards Europe. Because, it's so expensive right now in the US. I mean, we could look at rents later, but, a 1-bedroom apartment, it's got to be over, £1,500 a month and maybe even more. So I think, that's going to be reflected in office space and lab space. So
I agree to that. I mean, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, I thought I found the Holy Grail. So I came to the same conclusions that you have. And I flew to the United States and talked with US-based investors and praised the glorious technology and science we have in Europe. And also came up with the same points and say, I mean, look, Europe, valuation-wise, is much lower than the United States. Also, the expenses for personnel or office space is much lower. So basically, when you invest in Europe instead of the United States, you get much more out of your money. And we also have entrepreneurs here in Europe who are experienced. And basically, they laughed and said, I mean, yeah, we are aware of that, but we don't invest in Europe. And I said, why? And the response was quite interesting. They said, because it's complicated. Europe there are so many different countries. It's not really a united market. So when you drive 200 kilometers, you have a completely different legal system, different language, different culture. Whereas, for example, in Canada, I mean, you can drive 200 kilometers and you're in the same country and not even touch a city, not even come close to a city. And this was one blocking point that said that really makes them not to move to Europe. Did you hear something similar when you were in the United States?
I actually haven't heard that, but I think I was quite young there, so I wasn't quite having these, cool conversations as much as I probably wanted to, but I think it's definitely some very good points. And I guess the question I have for you actually is how is it in Austria? Because I mean, I know Hermann Hauser, who I guess was quite influential sort of Austrian
Absolutely.
and he especially what I know is he helped really generate Illumina and did a lot of the work, Selexa, that eventually sort of created sort of these next generation sequencing technologies. But how do you see it in Austria and Vienna? Because it's such a lovely, fantastic place. I mean, my parents have visited and absolutely love Vienna. I think they might move there actually in a couple of years if they can.
Austria is a lovely place. I completely agree to that. I miss the seaside though, so it's a little bit different to Greece. Mm-hmm. So sailing is not as much fun in Austria than it is in Greece or in the United Kingdom. To the ecosystem, Hermann Hauser is well known. He and his family is doing a great job in Tyrol. I mean, they have the IECT summer school, which is set up around the mission to support scientists in understanding and learning what it takes to found and build a company. And the really great thing about Hermann Hauser and his summer school is that they don't try to turn scientists into entrepreneurs. They say, we just want to make aware that you need a team with a diverse skill set. So, which is very great. When it comes to the ecosystem here in Austria, I think it's probably one of the best places to found a company, as long as it's a deep tech life science company. So we must just stay in the life science space, because there is a lot of public funding sitting around. The average storytelling or the average founding story is when you have a few $100,000 initial starting capital, you get 1 to 2 million public funds, and it really helps to come over this so-called valley of death. But once a company needs to go out on the market to raise a Series A, there are almost, there's basically, it changed a little bit, but there's almost no fund here in Austria who has the capability to structure or to finance around north of 10 million euros by itself. So it's necessary to raise funds all over Europe, also the United Kingdom. Mm-hmm. And I think this is a huge difference to the ecosystem in the United Kingdom. But from the living expenses, I mean, for entrepreneurs, it's very cheap, in my opinion. So it's probably cheaper than living in London or Oxford. When the company matures and needs to raise a Series B or Series C, I think we are in the same spot like the United Kingdom. We have to look overseas to the United States to raise larger rounds. But for starting a company, I mean, highly welcome. Move to Austria.
I need a visit. Sounds like an amazing place.
Yeah, it's fun here. Vassilis, I think we're at the end of our talk. It's 4 minutes before 5 p.m. here in Austria, and I think it's 4 p.m. in the United Kingdom. One final question. When you speak to undergrads in Oxford and they ask you for advice, what you would recommend if they want to become an entrepreneur, what's the first step they should be doing?
I would tell them, take a risk. I think, do something that you probably, wouldn't have done before. And I definitely think, make sure you think about it and you do it for the right reasons. But, the time to take a risk is when you're younger. And I think that's what I would try and tell them. But, I think all the students are also incredibly smart. So I think I'm also asking them for advice as well. So it's not really a one-way street, but I'd say take a risk. They're all so smart. And I think, you can apply this anywhere you want. So do something that, has, high risk, high reward.
Vassilis, thank you very much for this interesting and nice conversation. You are living in probably one of the best places for science in the world, in Oxford. Enjoy your time there, and I hope we stay in touch.
Thank you very much, Christian. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Have a great day. Bye.
Take care.
Thanks for listening. Please share the podcast and make sure you've subscribed. Have a great day.